very warm welcome to our online presentation, Dealing with Anger. My name is John and I will be your host. Before we start, just two things I just want to point out. Firstly, I will be using a comprehensive PowerPoint presentation, and the reason being that the majority of people learn visually, so it's important for them to hear and see the presentation. And secondly, it also helps to keep me on track, seeing that we've got a lot of information to cover and relatively little time. And in addition to that, if anybody has any questions, any queries, you are more than welcome to direct that to me, and I will give you my contact details at the end of the presentation. So let's look at today's topic. We're going to look at core emotions to start off with. Anger is a basic emotion that everybody feels. We all go through times where we experience anger in response to situations. Obviously, today's topic will go beyond just simply looking at anger as an emotion, but more if anger maybe becomes a problem when somebody deals with what is referred to as anger issues or rage, where anger is having a negative impact on their lives. We will look at some principles with regards to that. But first of all, just to lay the foundation, I just want to look at, as I said, core emotions. And these are the basic emotions all of us experience, sometimes all in one day, but at least at some stage in our lives. And I'm going to go through the list and just make one or two comments on that, and then we will focus on anger as such. The first emotion is joy, and this speaks for itself. I feel good, I feel confident, I feel content, I feel happy, I enjoy, I experience pleasure. Anger, which is the result of stress hormones being released into the system. Sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, and shame. The main difference between joy and the others would be the fact that joy is the result of the release of so-called feel-good chemicals within my nervous system. And amongst others, those chemicals or neurotransmitters are dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. And these are chemicals that are released because I'm thinking positive, happy, pleasurable thoughts at the time, and my nervous system responds chemically and releases these various feel-good chemicals, and I feel good. The other emotions are experienced as more negative, and that is the result of me thinking more negative thoughts. And the nervous system releases a range of stress hormones that make me feel the various negative emotions. And this particular list, the further down this list we go, the more negative our experience is, because our thinking is becoming more and more negative, and the nervous system is releasing more and more stress hormones, and we experience a more disempowering and unresourceful state. So that was just a basic introduction to the whole idea of what emotions are. And we are now going to focus more on anger, and in particular, if anger should be problematic for anybody, how to deal with that. It's important to understand the difference between the emotion of anger, as I've intimated. Everybody goes through emotions at different stages of their lives or different times of the day. And those emotions are the result of a situation that I may be facing, a certain way that I think about the situation, and the chemical reaction in my nervous system. And there is a very specific message in anger, which we will look at a bit later on. So there's a difference between the emotion of anger and having anger issues, experiencing rage, in other words, experiencing levels of anger that may have a negative impact on my life, that may cause negative behavior, that may create more problems. And we're going to look at what the difference is between the two and how I can address any possible potential anger issues. The main reason why we experience anger is because there is a sense of violation or imposition. We are facing a situation, or we are dealing with somebody where we experience something being forced onto us, expected to do something that we don't want to do, a situation where we feel our sense of self-determination may be affected, where we don't have the ability to make our own choices, our own decisions, and where demand is placed on us. And in response, there is a certain thought pattern that is triggered, and we think these thoughts that I've just mentioned, thoughts and that create the feelings of, could start off with frustration, that could lead to anger, that could ultimately lead to rage if we don't find a way to process the emotion. So there is an imposition or there is a violation, and that is the reason why we experience anger. From there, this can progress to viewing the violation as a threat, and that calls for the activation of our survival instinct. And what I mean by that is, if I don't find a way to resolve the situation that I'm facing, address it where I'm experiencing a sense of violation, it could go further where I start to interpret there is a threat, there is danger, I need to do something to address it. And the moment my thinking goes along those lines, there are various processes that take place within the brain and the nervous system, and that triggers my instinct for survival, and various parts of the brain come into play, the amygdala being one, that basically is responsible for the fight, flight, or freeze response. And that is all the result of a story that I'm telling myself at the time, a narrative, meaning that I'm giving to the situation that turns the whole situation or moves it from just simply a sense of violation to it becoming a threat. And the moment I experience a threat, my instinct for survival gets triggered, and it then leads to certain behaviors and certain actions. The feelings of anger relays the need for healthy boundaries, a very important principle to understand. When I experience a sense of violation or imposition that could lead to a feeling of being under threat, those various feelings are sending a message to me that the reason why I am experiencing a sense of violation or imposition is because there may be a lack of boundaries in that particular situation or towards that particular person. And that is a message for me to pay attention to this and to look at how I can go about establishing and communicating the boundaries. So that feeling of insecurity that results, of that feeling of being threatened, is the result of a lack of boundaries. And what do we mean by boundaries? In simple terms, when I communicate a boundary, I communicate what I will allow myself to experience, what I will allow myself to no longer experience, what I will say yes to, and what I will say no to on my terms. And another important principle with regards to boundaries is that until I communicate that boundary does not exist. It is no good the boundary just existing in my head. I've got to verbalize it. I have to communicate it. I have to send the message across to the person that I may be dealing with. And I need to find a way to establish that boundary. And that boundary not only sends a message to others of what I will allow myself to experience and what not, what I will say yes to, what I will say no to, but it also provides me with a sense of safety and security. And very, very important to get that message every time we feel a sense of anger. There are different kinds of anger or different kinds of aggressive behavior. Aggressive behavior is very often the behavior that results from feeling violated and feeling threatened. Passive is when we tend to accept other people's criticisms of us. We avoid conflict no matter what. We rarely contest others or disagree with them, and that would be the result of a lack of boundaries, where I do not communicate what I will allow and what I won't allow. And until I've communicated that I may be at risk of being taken advantage of, being walked all over, so to speak. And very often that is the result of a need for people pleasing or a need for rescuing, and that is linked to an insecurity where I then need to find ways and means to make others notice me, to make others appreciate me. And that lack of boundary can lead to passiveness. And that passiveness over time can lead to feelings of frustration, especially, as I said, when I'm being taken advantage of because of my lack of boundaries. And that could lead to passive aggression. And I'm feeling frustration building up, but I don't have boundaries in place. I don't address the situation, so it leads to passive aggression. And that results in us not sharing our honest view when we're asked. We may feel a very strong view on certain things, but for various reasons, we are unable to communicate that. So we tend to keep our opinions to ourselves, which adds more to the frustration. We also don't let others know when we are dissatisfied with them, when we feel frustrated by them. And we may even go as far as becoming part of gossip, but never confronting. So we are experiencing feelings of frustration, but because we don't find ways to express them, because of a lack of boundaries, it then turns into passive aggression. And that may escalate ultimately to feelings of aggression, where the frustration starts to increase. It starts to get more and more, and I start to find it more and more difficult to deal with situations or with people. And that could then turn to aggression, and we become reactive then towards people. We may start to put people down in front of others. We may start to be fueled by anger, and that's very often where frustration leads to anger, and anger leads to rage, and rage ultimately may lead to irresponsible, harmful, sabotaging behavior. And we then become known as somebody with a short fuse or somebody with anger issues. And the reason is because there has been this progression as the result of a lack of boundaries and not addressing the situations or the issues that started causing us frustration because we were experiencing a sense of violation, imposition, or threat. We're going to look at a 3-minute video that explains some of the principles regarding anger.
It doesn't take a lot to make me angry. What about you? Did some schmuck cut you off on the freeway? Maybe your boyfriend accidentally shredded that birthday card your grandma sent you. So you freak out, you scream maybe, a vein pops out of your forehead. It happens to everyone. But did you know that anger is actually affecting your physical health? Hey, anger is inevitable, okay? You can't just stop getting angry. Even the world's most sedate person has uttered a few choice words in traffic. Will that expletive fest really make you feel better? Will punching a wall really calm you down? The answer is no. Sorry, but recent studies have shown that angry reactions are pretty harmful to your physical health. A Yale University study found that people with anger management issues tend to get sick more often. Their anger actually weakens their immune system. The Journal of the National Medical Association added that people who respond negatively to anger are 9% more likely to have a heart attack. Hey, that might not sound like a lot, but come on, it's a heart attack. Every percentage point counts. Other studies have linked anger to everything from coronary disease to high blood pressure. Now that we all know that excessive angry outbursts are bad for you, we're going to teach you how to manage that anger in 4 simple steps. All you're going to need is that handy-dandy well-cast journal, a little bit of time, and a teeny bit of self-awareness. Step 1, control your breathing. When something pisses you off, instead of screaming or laying on the horn, take deep breaths. Spend 2 to 3 minutes breathing deeply, in through your nose, and out through your mouth. Imagine inhaling calm blue air and exhaling that red toxic air. Step 2, relax your muscles. Unclench your fists. Make a conscious effort to loosen those shoulders and slump a little. Great posture is awesome, but for now, let those muscles unwind. I promise it'll help. Step 3, get it out. Once you're relaxed and breathing deeply, grab your well-cast journal. If it's a road rage thing, obviously please pull over, but when you get a chance, write down exactly what made you angry. Step 4, seeking context. It's important to put your anger into context by thinking rationally instead of emotionally. Think about it. Are you going to be angry tomorrow? Probably. What about a week from now? Maybe. A month? Probably not. A year? I don't think you'll remember, but by examining your anger this way, you can displace yourself from it, and you'll be able to process your anger without letting it take over your life. Let's recap. You need to find a healthy way to process your anger, or else you could run into some really nasty health problems. Remember to relax and breathe evenly, and then work through your anger by writing it down and contextualizing it. We can't promise you won't get angry ever again, but hopefully with this, you found a way to deal with it a little bit better.
I intimated in the beginning that our emotions are the result of chemical, biochemical, neurochemical processes within the brain and the body in response to our thinking in a situation, the story that we're telling ourselves about the situation, in other words, the narrative going on inside of us. There is a biochemical, neurochemical response to that narrative, to that story. The quality of the story, for example, if I'm telling myself a story of hurt, certain stress hormones will be released and I feel the emotion of hurt. Or I tell myself a story of anger and the stress hormones that are being released cause me to feel the anger. And the purpose of stress hormones is to alert and energize me to take action in the face of a threat as part of my instinct for survival. And it is also another important principle to understand is that we are programmed towards negativity, towards an awareness of threats. And that is part of our evolutionary predisposition that we inherited from our forefathers. Thousands of years ago, people were exposed to more natural dangers than we are exposed to today. So they basically had to be on the lookout. They had to remain vigilant in order to keep safe. And that became programmed into the human DNA. And we are still predisposed to that today. We are more inclined to first focus on a problem before we start thinking about any solution. We are triggered very easily, and the reason for that is because of the programmed instinct for survival. So the release of stress hormones cause that feeling of alertness and awareness, and they'll also contribute to various functions within the brain and the body that puts us in a position to fight or flee in response to a negative situation or a threat. So the stress hormones serve a very important purpose in that they are relaying a message to us that there is a potential threat, a potential risk, and that we need to take action in order to survive. What makes the difference between feeling angry as a natural, healthy emotion that helps me to keep myself safe and developing so-called anger issues or rage? Why do some people have a shorter fuse than others?